Thank you, Safari, and thank you, colleagues from the State Department for Diaspora, from the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, Kenyans in diaspora, wherever you might be. This is the last of these three sessions for stakeholder engagement for our conversation on this labor migration management bill. I want to thank you for making the time to come and have this really important conversation. I wanted to make a couple of really quick remarks which in my mind will anchor this conversation before I step back and allow really the owners of this bill, who are the Ministry of Labor, take us through the bill and then take your comments. Now, colleagues and friends, here at the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, one of our really important mandates is to protect the rights and welfare of Kenyans abroad. And a second mandate that works with that one is to harness opportunities for diasporians for employment and business abroad. These two pieces of mandate are the reason we are working together with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection to bring together this bill to you. Of course, as you already know, diasporians, one of the things that we are also tasked to do is to mainstream your participation in the process of national development. A big part of that national development is ensuring that you are taking part in whatever decisions are being made by the state on your behalf or on behalf of Kenyans, so that you're a part of the journey. So whenever we have law reform, whether it is bills that have to do specifically with you or with Kenya broadly, we want to be able to bring them to you and for you to participate. This particular one is of particular importance to Kenyans living abroad because it specifically touches this idea of labor that is on the move. I want to say three really quick things. One, I want to speak about the rationale for this bill. Why was the Labor Migration Management Bill 2023 put together? Three things. The first one, again, as I said, is to protect the rights and welfare of Kenyans abroad. I have been in office now 9 months. And for those 9 months, I can tell you that one of the most sticking issues that we have continued to face has been the plight of migrant workers, where you've had workers go to a different country, have had their rights not protected, have found themselves to be victims of human trafficking, or sometimes have found themselves on the wrong side of the law. And a big part of our job here then is to ensure that they are fine. Sometimes that has meant that we have to rescue them from dangerous situations. Sometimes it has meant that we have tried to extend legal aid, and sometimes that has meant we have to intervene in even more disruptive ways. But there hasn't existed a framework that allows us to do this well. So the big thing that this bill tries to do is to protect the rights of Kenyan workers abroad. Secondly, we are trying to facilitate the employment of Kenyans abroad. So far, for the last maybe 2 decades, the employment of Kenyans abroad has been ad hoc, it has been unregulated, and in many ways our own laws and systems for regulating and for really structuring foreign employment have sat in various places. So you have a little bit that has sat in traditionally the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You've had a big chunk of it that has been in the Ministry of Labor. You have had elements that are found in the State Department for Social Protection. We have bits and pieces that are in security, the DCI, and so on. And what this has meant is that coordination has not always been very good. But also, what that means is sometimes some things fall through the cracks. Migrant workers in many ways are very vulnerable, and we have tried to protect them by creating a bill then that sort of structures our engagement and the facilitation of employment in foreign countries. Facilitation means how can we make it easier for Kenyans to find jobs abroad? How can we make it faster for them to complete their journey of pre-migration. But how can we better support them both before they move, but also after they move? And the third rationale for this bill has been to regulate the players in this space. For many years, it has been led by private sector, and really because we are in a global labor market, and market forces are at play. So it is expected indeed that private sector has led labor migration. So many people have had jobs abroad because they have hustled and found that job, or because a recruitment agency has been able to match demand with supply and gotten them jobs abroad. But these spaces haven't been regulated well. So we have found often employers who have not always treated our citizens right when they go to these foreign countries, and we've not been able to protect them. We have had migrant workers not knowing where to go for help because there hasn't been a structured way for them to engage. But you've also had recruitment agencies, a number of them legit, but also a number who have been rogue, a number unregistered, and have still managed to, as they call it, kusafirisha wa Kenya. So we want to regulate this space a little bit, in a little bit of a stricter way to protect the lives and livelihoods of Kenyans. So what has the journey of this bill been? One, it has been a lot of benchmarking and a lot of learning lessons from other countries who've gone before us. A study has been done by various players within the Ministry of Labor, and even here at the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, other countries that are labor-sending countries, whether it be the Philippines, whether it is Sri Lanka or India or other places. We have studied their systems to understand how do they protect their migrant workers so well. Many of you, maybe not you guys here, but others, have constantly on our social media said, why can't the government of Kenya protect its employees or its migrant workers the way the Philippines does? This is the solution for that. We have studied what the Philippines is doing. We have taken some of those lessons and have put them in this bill. So we've asked ourselves, how have countries that have succeeded both in getting large numbers of diaspora out there, but in protecting them as well and keeping their families intact, how have they done it? We have studied that. We have tried to bring some of that here. We've done quite a bit of engagement within government, creating the labor migration policy, which has just passed through cabinet now, and then the creation of this bill. This bill also brings together a number of acts of parliament, which if you look at part 8, you will see all of the bits that it tries to amend. Now, what is the journey of a bill? You have done the policy, you have a draft, you take it through stakeholder engagement, which is what we are doing here. You ask yourselves, this bill, who is it going to affect the most? And then bring them together and have a conversation. We are at the stakeholder engagement level. And here we are asking you, Kenyans who live abroad, to give us your comments on this bill so that they can make their way into the text of what eventually becomes the law. Now, that probably is not happening with other persons. It is happening with you because you're a stakeholder. I want to underscore the fact that this is not the end of that conversation. After you have worked through the bill, I know a number of you have read it. After you have read it, after it's been presented to us today by the panel, and you have given your comments, and we are sharing the email address that you can send more of those comments on, then all of that will be sent to Labor, which is the sponsor of this bill. Do you have an opportunity to engage the bill again? You do. Once it goes to Bunge and it begins the process, then there will be an opportunity for what is called public participation. So at that point as well, you can come back and say, we looked at the bill when it was presented to us during stakeholder engagement. We didn't like 1, 2, 3 things. We would like to engage some more and participate. That is your constitutional right, and we want you to be able to do that. Public participation and give your comments. And then at that point, you can participate directly. We are happy to host another conversation like this where you can participate. But beyond that, you can also participate directly through Bunge. And also those are things that we can help put together for you. And then after that, if it passes public participation and all of those other processes, only then does it become enacted into law. So this is not the last of our engagement. We expect and hope that you will continue engaging with us. But finally, diaspora, I want to say that as you look at this bill and as you engage with this bill, it is important that you understand the intention of the drafters of this bill and what we are trying to do. Government's job is really 3 or 4 things. In this particular issue, government's job is to facilitate, government's job is to regulate, is to create policy, and is to protect. And those are the 4 things that this bill tries to do. So as now I hand over to the panel, I want to thank you again for making the time to come and join us for this conversation, and I really, really look forward to hearing your comments. Asanteni sana.
So I will not read all the provisions in the Act. I hope everyone has access to the bill. If you don't have access, you can get it through the NEA website or the labor.go.ke website. And then it also gives for conditions for registration of private employment agencies. And also there's the part for the contingency fee, where it gives provision that every private employment agency engaged will pay upon receiving notification of approval and notification of payment from the Director General. This is the Director General Employment. Pay a contingency fee to the fund at the rate prescribed in regulations. So this contingency fee is going to replace the security bond. The security bond was there to make sure that if a Kenyan is out there, they can be repatriated, but we've been having challenges in executing the security bond. So what is happening is we are converting the security bond into a contingency fee so that the contingency fee will be used for the purposes of repatriation, paying wages and other entitlements in the event of default by private employment agency or the employer in the country of destination. So the fund in this provision is the Kenya Migrant Workers Welfare Fund, which I'll talk about it in the next section. Then also, it also provides for approval of job orders, advertisement of jobs by the private employment agencies. And also it gives a code of conduct of private employment agencies. The code of conduct already exists, but it's being reviewed so that it can be able to capture emerging issues which are coming up. And then it also provides for obligations of a private employment agency. I'll read a few of the obligations, and this includes keep and maintain registers of recruited workers, and also submit it to the National Employment Authority, provide a contract of employment to a migrant worker at least 3 days before the date of departure, ensure that a contract of employment complies with provisions of any relevant written law, bilateral labor agreement, and memorandum of understanding, keep and maintain any record, which by regulations made under this Act is required to be kept for a period of 3 years, notify the authority of any migrant worker who is in distress, inform the authority in writing any changes in particular stated in the application, and also file returns as prescribed in the regulations. So also another provision in the Act that the bill provides is that a private employment agency shall not charge or receive in respect anything done or to be done to an employment agency. So we are trying also to subscribe to the international standards that during the migration phase, a migrant worker is not supposed to incur any costs, any recruitment costs during the migration pathways. And also it also gives penalties for contravening of this subsection, which would be a fine not less than 1 million or imprisonment for not exceeding 2 years of both. So then, and it's heavily on private employment agencies because currently placement of migrant workers in Kenya is largely done by private employment agencies, or some of the, for the skilled workers, most of them go on their own. And then on part 4, it gives for provision of pre-departure procedures for foreign employment. This includes what has to be done before you depart the country. So one is pre-departure orientation. And as the PS has mentioned, we have the labor migration policy, which gives provision for mandatory pre-departure orientation so that before a Kenyan leaves to another country for work, they're supposed to have information on what they're supposed to, they're supposed to have prior information on about the country in which they're going to travel to. And then it also gives provision for foreign contracts of employment and also prescribes what should be in the foreign contract of employment. It also gives for attestation of foreign contracts of employment. This is where before you leave the country, you have to be attested by the labor officer who are under the State Department of Labor, under the Labor Department. And after attestation, the private employment agency is supposed to submit the contract to the National Employment, the attested contract with the National Employment Authority. The private agency has to pay the contingency fee and also has to ensure that the terms and conditions of employment contained in the contract comply with the approved job orders and the provisions of employment laws. Then it also gives for security, provision for security in foreign contracts of employment, and also provides for offense when a migrant worker is induced to go abroad without their consent or misrepresentation or maybe information was not given clearly. Then it also gives for registration of migrant workers and also provides for exemptions of this Act of Parliament. So some of the people who will be exempted from this Act will be a person employed in the service of national government or county government who, with permission from the competent authority, is going overseas to perform an official duty or for the purposes of education or training or employment with an international multilateral organization, a student, a trainee, or a tourist, employment of seafarers, a person immigrating for employment in a foreign government or international multinational organization, a person immigrating for the purpose of medical treatment or religious, business, or investment purposes, a dependent of any Kenyan citizen employed in the foreign country and lawfully staying there, a person who initially immigrated for education and later accepted employment in a foreign country, and a person immigrating for purpose which is not in conflict with the purposes of this Act. So there are some exemptions to some of the Kenyan migrant workers who are out there. Then on part 5, it's on enforcement. How will some of the provisions of this bill be enforced? One is through appointment of inspectors, and inspectors in this case is the employment officers who inspect the premises of private employment agencies and also monitor compliance with the provisions of this Act. And then on part 6, on part 6, sorry, it's part 6. So it talks about it provides for establishment of the Kenyan Migrant Workers Welfare Fund. And also I will allude to what the PS had talked about earlier about, we have been having a lot of distress cases, issues of the plight of our Kenyan migrant workers out there. So, and this emanated during the COVID-19 period when we had a lot of Kenyan migrant workers stranded out there. And as government, we were not able to provide immediate repatriation to distressed migrant workers. So we have been having conversations with various stakeholders and some of the migrant workers returnees. And we decided that we should be able to establish a fund, but the fund will be a collaborative fund where we will be having contributions from migrant workers, from the private employment agencies, from the government as well, and also with development partners. And this fund is to be established under this act, under this bill, and the fund shall be a body corporate with perpetual succession and a common seal. And that's why we didn't establish the fund under the Public Finance Management Act, because some of the money coming to the fund is from the private sector, and it's important to have accountability by the migrant workers themselves and how the money can be used. So I just read the objects of the fund, and this is also covers the purpose of the fund. One is to provide relief assistance to migrant workers and their families, provide invalidity benefits to migrant workers, provide medical assistance to migrant workers, And this medical assistance is not going to replace the medical insurance that migrant workers have. So the purposes of this fund is just to complement the existing structures that we have in terms of protection of migrant workers. Number D is to provide assistance to migrant workers and their families during calamities and destination countries. Provide survivor benefits where a migrant worker dies. This is a benefit that is given to family members when the breadwinner or the mother or the father dies. So the family is given some kind of income replacement for a short period of time. Then provide funeral grant where the migrant worker dies. So the difference between the survivor benefit and the funeral grant is the funeral grant is supposed to just cover the funeral expenses, and then the survivor benefit now is given to the family for some kind of income replacement as they now try to find ground to get income or now get yeah. Then G is to provide psychosocial support to migrant workers and their families. Provide legal assistance to migrant workers involved in disputes with their employers. In this case, legal assistance will only be limited to disputes, to employment disputes, and not any other disputes that are outside the employment spectrum. Then it will also be used to repatriate migrant workers in distress or bring back the remains of a migrant worker who dies abroad. Collaborate with relevant agencies to support skills development and recognition of migrant workers. Support pre-departure training programs, support return and integration programs for migrant workers, create awareness and sensitize migrant workers and members of the public on labor migration. So the reason why the purposes of this fund are quite broad is because when we were having the consultative discussions, we noticed that migrant workers have different needs, have different challenges in different regions. So, and also even in terms of skilled migrants and low-skilled migrants. So we tried as much as possible to have quite a wide vast of benefits for our migrant workers. But then also we'd also invite comments on if the benefits are adequate, or maybe we'd like us to add some or remove some. And then also on the fund, just to indicate that the fund will be mandatory, so that to ensure that our migrant workers out there, they're well protected, and also to be able to track where our migrant workers are. And then also part of the fund is that we'll have a board of the fund, and the management of this fund shall consist of a chairman, the principal secretary for labor, principal secretary for finance, the attorney general, the principal secretary for diaspora, and one person nominated by the most representative federation of employers, one person nominated by the most representative federation of trade unions, one person nominated by the most representative association of private employment agencies, one representative of migrant workers nominated by the most representative association of migrant workers, and the CEO of the fund. So we tried as much as possible to include the key players, that is the migrant workers, the private employment agencies, the associations of employers in the country, and the associations of workers in the country. Then the rest of the provision on Part 6 just gives a verification of office, just how the fund will be able to run. And just to indicate that at the moment, we have not indicated how much money will be contributed to the fund, because we are still carrying out costings and actuarial studies on how much contributions will be made to the fund. And this will be done by an expert opinion, who is an actuary. But the amount will be put into the regulations. The Act just gives provision for establishment of the fund. And I think I'll go to Part 7. Then Part 7 talks about miscellaneous provisions, which is just giving on provisions of restriction on labor migration. And as the bill provides that the Cabinet Secretary may, by notice, Cabinet Secretary is the Cabinet Secretary for Labor, by notice in the Gazette, restrict migration of Kenyan workers to a particular country if migration to that country may jeopardize public interest or health and safety of migrant workers. And also it may restrict a category of migrant workers. And then it also gives for provision of repatriation of migrant workers. Yes, the fund will offer repatriation of our migrant workers, but in the event where it's found that the private employment agency deployed a migrant worker in a case where maybe the migrant worker was unfit in terms of medical ground, or for a reason which the migrant worker is not responsible, having been sent out of the country, or the authority finds out that the worker has been engaged or sent out by misrepresentation or by mistake, then it will be the responsibility of the private employment agency that sent the migrant worker to repatriate them back. Then we have a provision for bilateral labor agreements. And the government has been engaging with different countries of destination in terms of signing bilateral labor agreements so that we can enhance the safe and fair orderly labor migration. We can also be able to increase opportunities for migration by Kenyan citizens for foreign employment, and also improve management of labor migration, improve the repatriation and integration of migrant workers, and safeguard welfare and rights of migrant workers. So far, we only have, the country has signed 4 bilateral labor agreements, starting the recent one, which was the one for the United Kingdom on nurses, which was signed in 2021. Then we have one with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, one with the State of Qatar, and another one with the United Arab Emirates. And all these agreements for UAE, Qatar, and Saudi are being reviewed to be able to ensure that our migrant workers are well and adequately protected. Then Part 8 of the bill gives provisions for consequential amendments. So as the PS also indicated earlier, that we have various provisions in different acts, for example, the Employment Act and the Labour Institutions Act. So the Labour Migration Management Bill is trying to bring all labour migration issues under one roof. So anything concerning labour migration will be found under the Labour Migration Management Bill. And I think I finished my presentation. So thank you very much for listening. And I would like to invite for comments on the bill. Thank you. Safari, you can take the floor.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for your very informative presentation. Together with your team, of course. I know you worked on this together. So I know that you've handled this since the inception, like we've gone through this and you're well versed to handle these questions that might arise. So now I'm going to give an opportunity to the diaspora members out there. For those who have burning questions, kindly feel free to raise up your hand and you can ask. So we're going to start with Mr. Danson Mukile. Danson Mukile, kindly, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Bwana Safari. Thank you, PS, for the comments. Thank you, Sharon, for the presentation. I'll be very quick, kindly. So my comments will just go directly to the document itself. And I wish to also invite you on page 5 on the definition of terms. So the foreign country has been repeated several times. I think it's worthy that it's also defined under the terms, the foreign country. I know foreign countries is under Immigration, Citizens and Immigration Act, but should be added in this part. In addition to that, there's that part says about Kenyan citizen. I think it is good to add the age under the same, because this thing is related to the labor. We don't just have it there hanging without specifying the age of Kenyan citizen, because a child who just born like an hour ago is still a Kenyan citizen. So adding in age should be 18 years old, should be defined as well in the act. The second part is migrant workers seems to be very, the definition of the term, part C, is employed in any foreign country. I don't think that part C is needed personally, because as Sharon has said, that we have those ones who will be exempted from this act. Like me, I live in the United States. I came as a student, like but right now I'm working, supporting my family as well as doing my remittances. But I don't fall under this bill as it is from the presentation from Sharon. So I don't think we need Part C in this act. About the functions of the employee attaché as well, I think they're well versed, they're very well defined, but adding in another function for the employee attaché, because the employee attaché works with the associations. You have said that they are migrant workers associations. So this attaché as well should have that function that will coordinate together with the migrant workers associations to deliver the welfare of the migrant workers wherever they are. So that should be added in as the function. On page 15, you said that's 22. Private employee agencies shall keep and maintain up-to-date register of recruited workers and provide this to the authority as and when it's required. I think we should have a time frame, maybe 6 months, because having just say when it's required, maybe you may not need this for a long time. So it should be defined as well, or it can be under the regulations. Sharon might explain to that because it's hanging. Then we have that part E saying notify the authority of any migrant workers who is in distress. I think that statement is hanging. It should add an action on it, notify the authority of any migrant, because distress is someone who is really suffering. So we should add as well an action item on the same statement so that it can make it to be a more concrete part. So what action will be taken, once you notify. I had an issue about exemptions, and I think Sharon has covered that. That was on the departure, because I felt that if they are not well defined, people can take advantage of these and use people, just leave and not be pre-trained before they leave. So I'll skip that. I'll move to page 23. It says under the composition of the board, Sharon had mentioned about the one migrant representative for migrant workers nominated by the migrant representative associations of migrant workers. I think this statement is very categorical because we have, unless I may be corrected, we don't have any migrant workers association as for now. In the diaspora, we only have diasporan associations. Like there are several, even some of their leaders of those associations are here. So it's saying most representative association of migrant workers, yet we don't have it well, unless there'll be registration of those associations under the regulations, that will be fine. But right now, it's not a reality. As they say, kwa ground mambo tofauti. So we have just associations of diasporians, even those ones who are in the Middle East. I know they are work under some associations, but we don't have any migrant workers association. And I may be wrong, but that is my comment on that. I know, Sharon, you have talked about the membership, register members, the fund, you have said paid contribution. So what is missing here is, as you have said, it will come under expert who will explain the percentage. Will it be a percentage? Will it be a figure? And this act should actually put the time frame. Is it an annual fund contribution? Is it a monthly contribution? Is it a one-time contribution that when someone is living as an immigrant worker will have to pay? Because I'm saying so because part 3 over the same, you say a person who contravenes subsection 1 shall not be issued with clearance certificate under section 28, 3, and B. So if you are, it should be very clear because that one is contradicting about the contribution. So if you are making the contribution, you're not supposed to get clearance to leave. So does it mean that this one will be a one-time payment you pay as you leave the country? So that one has to be looked into. And number 2, we are putting this to the migrant workers. The agencies are not captured at all. The agencies or the contributors of the fund, can we include it be like under the agents of, that will be taking people abroad? Can they also have that section that defines them that they'll be making contribution to the fund as well? It's missing in the whole act. So that is contribution I felt that should be added. And also saying the government will also put in some money. I know Madam PS mentioned that as well. it should also be defined in this act as well, so that those sources of funds should be here, so that when it's not being done, we'll take those leaders or those people in the offices be accountable to the act. Sometimes regulations fail, but when you go to the law, to court, they always refer to the act. So let those contributions as well be defined in the act the way the migrant workers are being mandated to do the same. As I conclude, I'll go to page 32 as well. Exemption area, any area. I think I may not be a good lawyer. I know Madam PS is good in this. The word any area, I think, is not a legal term. I don't think it should be used legally. Exemption of any area. It should be more specific. Legally, you cannot justify in the court of law. As I finish, the last part of it, it says the rate at month, the contribution. I think that one will be captured in the regulations, as I've said. And then now, Sharon had highlighted some things about what the fund will be doing. And the senator, Senator Mutinda, has also in the schedule said that the bill mandates the national government to consult with any county government in creation of registers and investment opportunities. How can this bill be factored in as creating investment opportunities? Yet the bill itself is not creating anywhere under the function of the fund, the investment opportunities. So what has been given under this is mostly the service delivery of the fund, the services the migrant workers will receive, but there is none about the investment opportunities that you say. These are some of the investment opportunities. Lastly, I would say I'm not persuaded that this bill should be under the Senate bill, because most of these things, they fall under the national government, national parliament. So we may have both of them, have both this bill go through the national parliament as well as the Senate, because reading through, I have not seen where it is actually clearly defined that this will be a county government led mostly for the migrant workers, unless there are other sections that will be added in to capture in the county government, because we don't want to reach a time that it has been passed and someone goes to the court and say, oh, this one is like that. So we need to fill that gaps as well, that this one also need to go to the National Assembly. The members of parliament should also vote in so that it can be, because you are amending and you're also deleting a lot of paragraphs from the 2007 Employment Act, as well as the Employment Act. That was an enactment by the National Assembly. So with that, I think it should still go back and then inform them that this is what is going on. So it's just my comments, need feedback from it. And thank you so much, Madam PS, for giving us this opportunity. I just want to tell my fellow diasporians that Madam PS has also made an announcement about our time of doing meetings. So kindly check out the social media handles for the diaspora website so that you can fill in the form about the best time you want us to be having these particular meetings. Thank you so much, Bwana Safari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Danson Pule, indeed, for your scholarly comments, questions, and suggestions. Indeed, I am sure the PS will agree with me that these are the kind of minds that we need to provide skills in Kenya. And I'm sure even the team from the Ministry of Labor agree with me that they should have engaged such kind of minds before. Therefore, I'm going to give this opportunity to Sharon and his team to proceed to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Safari. I don't know if there's anyone from my team who would like to respond, but just thank you, Mr. Dasson, for those comments. We'll consider them. And just to add that you talked about agencies not being part of contributions, but when you check section clause 52, page 29, it provides for section. Let me just read through it. So under section 52 of the bill, The monies of the fund shall comprise such monies as may be appropriated by the National Assembly for the purpose of the fund. Monies received as contributions, these are from migrant workers under Section 52. Contingency fees received from private employment agencies. Fees and charged money and assets as may accrue. And then all monies from other sources provided for or donated or loaned to the fund. So what I had indicated earlier, that this is a collaborative effort. So it should cover both government, the migrant workers, the employment agencies, and other development partners. Thank you very much, and thank you for the comments. I don't know if there's any of my colleagues who wants to comment. And maybe just to add on the return and integration part. So on the investment, we didn't explicitly write the different investments in the bill, because when you look at the objects of the fund, there's a part for return and integration. So return and integration covers very many aspects. It could be employment, it could be investments, it could be savings. So when we do the regulations, we'll be able to define, when you talk about return and integration programs, what are some of the things that you'll be looking at? Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there any other member from the Labour team that would like to add anything on what Sharon said? Okay, because of time, I will move forward and proceed and allow, is it Mr. or is it Mrs.? I'm saying Mulay. Kindly, Mulay, kindly take the floor.
Sure, thank you very much. It's Mr. I have a few comments, but I'll just start by saying that this is a great initiative, but I've talked to a number of my colleagues here, and they say that, you know, people are already paying a lot of insurance premiums into health insurance funds, into burial benevolent funds, and they do not see why they should pay additional fees to the fund. And they do not like the way, you know, that it's going to be made mandatory. So if it must be factored, can it be made optional so that someone can opt out? Why? Because if someone is already paying money into, say, a burial benevolent fund, then why should they pay an extra amount of money to the government? That's one. Then two, you'd appreciate that, you know, the process of having approval, sending in the paperwork, having that processed and all that can take some time. In any case, this person it might be too late before this person gets to enjoy that service for which this bill seeks to provide to the Kenyan. If someone dies, how much time is it going to take before, you know, assistance can be granted to that person? So really, it's like, the people I've talked to do not want to have the government interfere with their lives in this manner and to this extent. The second point is on the payment of the fee, the contribution to the fund. Now, Section 28 says that a person who intends to travel to another country for purposes of foreign employment shall apply to the authority for registration in the prescribed manner, and an application for registration shall be accompanied by an attested foreign contract of employment, and then B, proof of payment of contribution to the fund. Now, assuming that this contribution is made optional, and then someone has to contribute because they feel that they are going into a high-risk jurisdiction, and they might need the services of, you know, the fund or the board or whoever, then this person is living in Kenya. They probably don't even have the money, right? Most people living in Kenya actually have to borrow to get plane tickets. They have to borrow to even get the documentation that you already have in place. And it's already bureaucratic as is. Certificate of good conduct from the police or from the DCI, and many other things that you have to do. You have to do your medicals, you have to do a certain number of things. So now we're adding another layer of bureaucracy and another layer of, you know, a Kenyan who doesn't probably have a good job or doesn't even have the money to have to pay So the point is, if I hope that it's going, the fund is going to be done away with, and if it must be put in place, then it's going to be optional. And if optional, then the Kenyan who opts to pay will have some grace period after they get their job to pay that optional contribution. And then the other thing in that same section, I believe, it says that a person who contravenes subsection 1 commits an offense and shall, upon conviction, be liable to a fine not exceeding, is it 100,000 or 3 months imprisonment or both? I find that to be very punitive because, a fine not exceeding 100,000 shillings or 3 months of both, that's quite punitive, given that the offense, really, if you look at the offense, or the offense that is going to be in place, and 3 months imprisonment, I don't think those two compare. I feel like this bill is really going to make Kenyans very unmarketable in the diaspora. It's going to make them not want to take the jobs, not unless these views that you're giving are going to be taken into account. My last point is going to be on section 51, but I think someone has already raised a question in the chat, so you can answer that question in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mlay. You have given us and the panel food for thought. And I think Sharon and Tim are ready to answer your question. Thank you.
If it's okay with you, Safari, may I answer Mulay's questions?
Yes, Madam PS, kindly.
And Sharon, with your consensus, allow me to speak to Mulay's questions, because I think you're raising some of the issues that have come up quite a bit about this bill. The first one, so let me give some context. As the bill is happening, the Labor Migration Management Bill is not happening in isolation. One of the things that we've been working on together with the State Department for Labor and to an extent Immigration and TVET is what we are calling the Global Labor Strategy. And the purpose of the Global Labor Strategy is to support and facilitate Kenyans who want to get jobs abroad. There's already 3 to 4 million of you working abroad, but we do have a serious problem of unemployment or underemployment. So as a government, we've taken a decision to help Kenyans find employment wherever that employment might be, by expanding our economy so that people can have jobs here, by expanding digital services in that space, so that Kenyans can have digital jobs or online jobs, and of course by working very hard to help Kenyans find and secure jobs abroad. So that is the direction of government, which, if I might even tell you a little bit, this is a deliverable that PS Kaituko in Labour and myself have to report to the President on a regular basis on. So that is to tell you that within the framework of regulation and the 4 things that I said government exists to do in this space, facilitation is at the top. Therefore, it is in our interest that bureaucracy is cut down as much as is possible, so that you don't have bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, but you have only that which is important for performing a certain function. So you've talked about, the time that sometimes it takes for Kenyans to be able to go through the process of getting their documents ready and be able to immigrate for work. One of the things that we are doing together with the relevant State Department is to put together a one-stop shop. And the one-stop shop brings together all of the various actors that then are in sort of the production line, quote unquote, for a migrant worker, whether it be immigration, whether that be labor, DCI, diaspora, everybody that you need in that line to be able to process a migrant worker. And that is going to increase our ability to work together so that we are using a one country team approach, and we are moving to basically make it easy for the people who want to live for work, make it easier for them. So that one-stop shop or the Kazi Maju centers are going to help both the private recruitment companies as well as the migrant workers themselves. So it is in our interest to bring down that bureaucracy so that Kenyans are able to move quickly. Well, some of the challenges that we've had have been that our processes sometimes take a long time, and so Kenyans lose out on opportunities. We are working very hard to really shorten those times. And if you speak to recruiters at the moment, we've been facilitating them actually at immigration and elsewhere to be able to process their documents fairly quickly. So we do not think that the creation of this bill is going to reduce the marketability of Kenyans. We actually think that it's going to help us to bring together the various agencies that are involved in this process and help us to move faster. Your other concern was largely about the fund. And if Kenyans are paying for, opting into either insurance firms, insurance companies, insurance plans, and so on, must they pay? The law, Mule, is made for the masses. Rarely is it made, for very specific cases. And in our experience, again, if you were here in the beginning, I started by explaining where the bill came from. In our experience, the bulk of the work that we do, or let me put it this way, every day since I have been in office, every single day, I have received a request to repatriate a body or to repatriate a distressed citizen every day that I have sat at this desk. Those are not people who have options, but those are people who, if we had the options, we would not be running around every day trying to get them out. Today, I'm embarrassed to say that I still have some bodies in mortuaries somewhere that I haven't been able to repatriate yet, but I'm working to do that. Now, these funds, or having an availability of a fund that helps us do this, for us becomes mission critical for us to be able to support workers. We have been embarrassed as a country, and it is bad for the brand, and that is the Kenyan brand, and that impacts whether people are able to get good jobs or not. We take a hit when we have distressed workers living in a park or on the street or making videos that they are in complete distress and cannot get help because, one, they have nowhere to go, but two, we don't have a mechanism or a system to be able to address that quickly. This fund allows us to do that. And I want to say this. There's a lot of resistance about paying into this fund. And yet, first of all, as Sharon said during the presentation, the figures that are to go into that fund are not yet out. But let me give you a picture, for example. The Philippines similar fund charges $20 for every 2 years. So if I am living as a security guard or a domestic worker to go to Oman, I pay $20 for my 2-year contract. That's about 2,500 shillings. And that fund allows me, that contribution allows me to get legal assistance. If I go separate ways with my employer, it allows me to be evacuated. Sometimes it allows me to have a little relief money, like in the time of COVID, they were able to do that. So it's very little money, but together it allows us to take care of those among us who are not as fortunate as you are, or who don't have the capacity to take up a private insurance. And so it's similar to NHIF or how we do these other insurances. So that becomes where we are. We make the law to be a safety net for the weakest among us. There is also the concern you raised from people you've spoken to about non-interference to their lives, and this bill is particularly interfering. I beg to differ, because we have been asked as government to step in on a regular basis. We are asked to interfere, sometimes in very difficult or very personal things. Okay, so on my desk right now are requests to repatriate bodies, to repatriate ashes. On my desk are requests to repatriate persons who are in distress in 3 different countries. That is interference, but that is the work government must do. So this bill, I submit, allows us to do those things. I think those are my comments. Safari, thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS, for your quick response. And clearly it indicates, shows that you're well versed in the bill and that you have the interest of the Kenyans in diaspora, and that the bill is not meant to be punitive, but to benefit the Kenyans in the diaspora. Thank you once again. At this point, I'd like to invite Sharon and the team from Ministry of Labor to give us any comments they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS. Thank you, Safari. I think the PS was very elaborate in explaining the role of government in ensuring that we provide safety nets for the people, for all Kenyans. So I think I'll leave at that. We can go to another comment. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to invite Dr. David Amakobe, DBA, to take the floor. Thank you. Daktari in the house, or we can move forward. Then if Daktari is not there, I'd like to invite one of our own, Ambassador Washington Olo. Is it? No, not raised. Sorry. Okay. We have Robert Chiuri. Robert Chiuri. Robert.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Bwana Safari. Thank you, Madam PS and the entire State of Diaspora Affairs Department, and also those working closely with our very, very hardworking PS, Roslyn. My name is Robert Chiuri, representing a number of diaspora organizations under the One Voice Consortium. And I must say from the outset, this bill is handy, is good. It's one of the things that may work very, very well for the diaspora and also for the migrant workers that are here. I just had 2 questions, and I actually had posted them on the Q&A. And one was in reference to perhaps, as you know, there are a lot of Kenyans here who are undocumented, or who we say they don't have makaratasi, and they're very, very, being here is very, very loosely kind of undefined and unstructured. And I'm just asking this because it may really help us a lot if there's a particular structure in which these people can be accommodated within this particular bill, and in a very, very formal way, because they're still our Kenyans. They contribute a lot to our economy through remittances and through other channels of investment. And this is very, very important for us. So if there's a way in which that is done and structured in a good way, we would really, really appreciate. My other question was more on the return and integration process for Kenyans that are here. As you know, there are many, many Kenyans who are here who, if there's a good structure and a good, program, they would be able to want to come back to the country and be involved more in nation building in various sectors. We know some of them can end up being even great employers, entrepreneurs, and they can be able to really help our economy in a much, much greater way. Right? Currently, we don't see a formal structure for doing this. And we know it is one way in which, diasporans can go back home and help the country in a much more meaningful way. I think this is something that needs to be captured very well. Perhaps not in this bill, but it needs to be really widened in terms of discussion, in terms of scope, and having a really defined and clear way in which people can be able to be encouraged to go back home and in a more formal way. This is a discussion that has been in our organization for some time. We know that there are people in the academic community that have been doing similar activities like that, and we would want to structure along those lines where people that are here or are able to do short stints with various universities back in Kenya, but we are looking more of this to involve the government and maybe the private sector, where Kenyans can be able to go back and do much, much more. Again, those are just two things that I wanted to share here. Knowing that this bill is good, we just need to look at areas that may end up having some issues or contention and really hammering them out. And especially if it can have two components. I know there's an issue about something being mandatory. I think there should be some discussion on giving some options to those who would want to be in it and who may not want to face any punitive measures that are there. So at least a balance of having mandatory or option may be one way in which it may work for a number of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Shuri. We have taken your welcome. We welcome your comments, and together with the Labour team, we're going to look and put forward and keep it into consideration. Thank you very much. We move on to welcome Mr. Laban Opande. Kindly, Mr. Laban Opande.
Maybe Safari, just to add on the return and integration, just to indicate that the bill articulates for return and integration, and also return and integration is being done by the National Employment Authority. We started last year. So far, we've been able to establish 3 reintegration centers under the National Employment Authority. And just to mention that, yes, as the PS had indicated, we have the policy, which clearly outlines the return and integration program for migrant workers. And some of them include savings and investment opportunities, business and enterprise development, labor market information, employment facilitation, skills upgrading, social benefits and retirement for planned return, welfare assistance, psychological counseling. So all these have been clearly defined in the policy, and as the piece had indicated, the policy is now in Parliament for consideration. So once the policy has been approved, we'll be able also to come back and take you through the policy and just outline for you some of the strategies that the ministry is working on. And just to reiterate that the bill will complement the fund, and the bill complements some of the existing strategies that we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me also speak to, sorry, Safari, yes. If you allow, let me speak to the piece on that undocumented Kenyans that Shuri raised. So you want to think about this bill as very targeted to dealing with migrant workers specifically. Our diaspora is much broader than that. We have diaspora who are permanent residents or who are dual citizens. We have students, we have children of any of these categories, and so on. And so the issues that you're raising will not be dealt, particularly about undocumented Kenyans and so on, might not specifically be dealt with under this bill. It is not the right place for it. But as we review the diaspora policy, which, as you know, is currently being reviewed, and eventually work our way towards a diaspora bill, and we'll be sending you dates on the process as it begins, then those are some of the things that we expect will be captured by under both the diaspora bill and the diaspora policy, because then it's broader than just migrant workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS. I think that was a good response received. So we move on to Mr. Laban Opande. Kindly proceed.
Sorry, thank you. It took me a second. I hope you can hear me.
Can hear you.
Thank you. So, and forgive me because I came in a little late, joined in a little late, but I've been in some discussions about this particular bill. I come from an organization called the Kenya U.S. Bar Association, which has about 180 or so Kenyan American lawyers here in the United States. And we've had some kind of robust, even though unstructured discussion on this bill. And there was some sentiments on two ends of the spectrum on how they generally feel. But I'll just kind of give my comments first before I even get to that. I thought the genesis, and I missed what Madam P.S. had given as a preamble, the genesis really was from a hue and cry of specific areas or specific regions. And so therefore the audience is sort of narrowed down as to where these distress issues, and it was supposed to address those distress issues. If we have a blanket sort of policy that covers the whole world, and then we have all these different geographic regions that have very different socioeconomic and even legal issues on the ground, then we are. The feel is that we are overstretching in coming up with this bill, and whose consequence then will affect those people who may not necessarily fall under this. And so the thought was, why wouldn't we have the agencies, let's say if it's a migrant worker who is an agent who is employing or sourcing employment, be responsible for either ensuring their employees who are departing, going to a specific place. That insurance will include life insurance, will include medical insurance, will include any kind of insurance that would cover either their assets or whatever the case may be. Now, the employee can then be able to pay into that fund or that policy. And so therefore, it's unique to that individual. Now, there's also the possibility that people will be migrating on their own. They source a job, they're not necessarily having to go through an agency. And then they'll be on notice that if you do so, then you're on your own, lest you subscribe into this fund. So the thought is, and we had this discussion, like I mentioned, that it's a good thing to talk about and come out and address it, especially when we're horrified with these videos and messages that come from different parts of the world. However, the response with the bill, then it's an overstretch. Now, and especially, and I must ask for forgiveness because I didn't really skim through the bill, but if the consequence, because every law has a punishment, if an enforcement part of it, if the consequence actually foresees loss of liberty, meaning you can go to jail, or very high monetary fines, then it really, really has to be something that has to be thought through, because we know that sometimes when people go back and they want to do certain thing and they're told, are you compliant? Are you a diasporan? Yes. Are you compliant with the fund? Have you been paying? And now we have then scenarios where potentially people who may not have been the target audience And the other thing is the solicitation to engage with these diaspora organizations. I did hear Brother Danson talking about workers organizations, which I also don't believe I've ever heard of any organization, worker or employer organizations based at least here in the United States. So therefore, Sorry, I don't know if I lost myself, a call coming in. I lost my train of thought. But in any event, I think my thing was to seek to engage diaspora organizations who actually are living and breathing the life of this diaspora life, and so therefore even those the authority or the management of the fund has to include the diasporians, then who can be able to be of advice. But that's my take on it, and I really do appreciate though the gesture and the invite to discuss and engage this. I think we have a lot of people who are interested to hear what comes out of this bill. The only thing is if it can be considerate to especially those cries from the diaspora who may not be the target audience of what the bill is intended.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pande. I think I'll allow our panelists to say a word. Sharon, do you have anything to say, or any member of the team?
I could respond to Laban's issue. I think he was presenting the position by the Kenya US Bar. And indeed, you raise an important issue about limiting the application of this bill. And it does speak to who it is targeting, who is to be under this bill. Now, you can prepare a bill and limit its application geographically, or you can limit its application by definition in terms of who is the subject of this particular law. The direction we went is to limit that definition to who is the subject of this law. And in the presentation earlier, Sharon spoke to migrant workers, private recruitment agencies, and so on and so forth. We have migrant workers, and I think this is a misunderstanding. There's been a lot of conversation about migrant workers being in the Middle East. The Middle East has migrant workers and it has diasporians. But we have migrant workers in Asia, we have migrant workers in the rest of Africa, we have migrant workers in the UK, and other places. So for example, if we were to limit this application to certain countries, then we don't cover or we don't protect the migrant workers who are currently in the UK. So the limit, then the approach to limit it, we took the subjects of the law as opposed to the geographic responses to that. Can it be fine-tuned a little bit so that the exemptions that are found in Section 31 are strengthened, perhaps, and maybe that is something we can look at going into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS. I also see Sharon, your hand is raised.
No, Safari, my hand is not raised, but the PS has elaborated. We'll try and look at the exemptions. But the problem we've been facing is that even in the UK, sometimes we get distress cases. So we were just looking at how best we can be able to ensure that our migrant workers are well protected. And for example, in the fund, there's no punitive measure if you don't pay to the fund, because the payment to the fund will be paid on your contract period. If your contract period is 2 years, then as Madam PS had indicated, for the Philippines, it's pegged for a period of 2 years for your contract. So what will happen is, if you have not paid to the fund, then you'll not be able to enjoy the benefits that the fund is providing. For example, Michael has asked in the chat that in the case of a distress call or death, will the membership of the fund determine if it will be applied? Yes, because for example, you went on your own, you didn't register to the fund, and you have a distress or death. If you're not a member to the fund, then the fund will not be able to. You'll not be able to access these benefits. So I think we took that space of just ensuring that we cover all our migrant workers, because at the end of the day, as long as you're a Kenyan citizen in the diaspora, then you're the responsibility of the government of Kenya. Thank you.
Okay, for the benefit of time, I'd like just to just remind you that we have 30 minutes to go, but we'll still take in a few more questions before we can answer a few other questions from the chat. And then we'll be able to receive these questions that we have received. We'll be able to look at them and be able to interrogate them and give our feedback. So this juncture, I'd like to give an opportunity to Linda Stewart. Linda Stewart, we have not heard a lady's voice apart from PS. So Linda Stewart, are you there?
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, okay. First and foremost, thank you for bringing this forum to place so that we can air our views. I must say, and congratulate ourselves, because as somebody who's part of a member of the Delaware African Caribbean Affairs Commission here in Delaware, I must say Kenya is doing very well in terms of how we are engaged with our diaspora issues. And for me, I think we are on the forefront compared to other countries. We may not realize how good we are, but one thing I know is that a lot of people recognize Kenyan employees abroad here because we are very intelligent. I don't know, that's a gift that we have. So I think we should also hold our migrant employees highly. Now, my question was about the agencies and how they're being regulated, because I know in 2021, Kenya was flagged by the Secretary of State, I guess Tony Blinken, about the employment agencies, I guess, having human trafficking issues with the employees who are coming over. So I don't know how our country is planning to regulate those agencies, because many a times we've heard that when the employees, or rather the migrant workers come here, they end up being paid less than the minimum wages. And also their wages are also withheld, where now they end up having hardships. So I know you guys have come up with this fee that people are supposed to pay, but are we regulating the wages that the employees are supposed to get based on the respective countries that they are migrating to? And I apologize, I haven't read the entire policy, but what I did first was to actually pull in the keywords for me as somebody, who's been in management, some keywords that kind of attract me as an employer or a leader. One is, I didn't see any discrimination word over there. I didn't see any racism, because we all face discrimination out here, abroad, but I didn't see the discrimination mentioned in that document. I'm not sure why, and I'm not a legal expert, but I think that word should be put there, because this is something we go through in our daily lives here. And I think that's a major thing that needs to be addressed more than even, anything else. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Madam Linda Stewart. I think Sharon, do you have anything to say?
Maybe she asked about regulation of the private employment agencies. I know it was flagged out, but later we went back to the green zone. But what Kenya has done is we have been, as I indicated earlier, when maybe she can try and get some time and look at the bill. There's provision for the private employment agencies, and we've outlined what the country is doing in terms of regulation of the private employment agencies. And regulation is done, the registration and vetting of all private recruitment agencies is done through the multi-agency committee, which is also clearly outlined in the bill. And through the National Employment Authority management system, I hope you can see my screen. It gives a list of all the licensed and registered private employment agencies. What we've been trying to do as a ministry is we've been trying to create awareness to Kenyans that before you leave the country, kindly inquire with the National Employment Authority to make sure that if you're going through an agency, you make sure that the agency that you're going through is a licensed agency. and on the part of discrimination and racism in the bill. So what happens is the bill only covers Kenya, the sovereignty of state. So the bill cannot be able to regulate another state. But what we do is the country has been trying to sign bilateral labor agreements, and those are some of the issues that we've been able to highlight in the BLAs. And then I think on the terms of wages for the countries that we have signed bilateral labor agreements, we have signed we've been able to sign some minimum terms of how much a Kenyan should be able to be paid. But what I know is for the developed countries, the employment laws in that country should be able to apply. So if you're being paid less than what the laws in that country apply, then you should be able to seek redress to the various employment agencies in that country. But also we have the issue of attestation. Before you're leaving the country, it's provided in law that you're supposed to be attested by a labor officer before you leave the country. So the need for attestation is that the labor officer takes you through your contract of service, and then you should be able to explain to the labor officer if you understand the terms and conditions in that contract of service. So whatever wages have been stated, and wages is part of the requirements to be stated in that contract of service. So you're not supposed to be paid less than what the contract of service you signed for. So what we've been having is most of our migrant workers have not been going through the attestation process, and that's where the problem is. But then if you're paid less than what your contract of service is, then that means there's a breach of contract. So sometimes if you're not able to reach the missions in that country, you can be able to you can be able to file, you can be able to report to the National Employment Authority, and we have an emergency reporting for migrant workers. So if you're in distress or there's any breach of contract, you should be able to register through the National Employment Authority and be able to report, and we shall be able to get you to the necessary referral and redress mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We still have
Sharon, I'm sorry. Just to correct you, the agencies that we're talking about are actually the private licensed agencies that it's happening. So once the migrant workers have come here, let's say, for example, they go through hardship, and at some point, it's very hard for you to even try to reach out to someone. So generally speaking, you can say even just a regular person, for them to go and file a lawsuit against an employer, considering the labor laws in America is always, most of the states, it's at will. It's kind of like you're beating a dead horse. So it doesn't really take you anywhere. So my recommendation, I think, is if the government of Kenya can continue vetting these private organizations, because they are the ones collaborating with the employers here to, I guess, to do the human trafficking. And that's why Kenya has been flagged as the #1 country that is a culprit with this, because it's happening with the private, those agencies. So I don't know how the government can crack down on those agencies, maybe as a way to follow-up to figure out where these, I guess, migrant workers and how are they faring on, or check-ins. There's got to be somebody who can do those check-ins to make sure that, I guess, there's no gray area or loophole. Make sense?
Yes.
Linda, if I might, Sharon, Linda, if you look through the bill, you will see that is extensively covered in Part 3. Part 3 has everything to do with the private employment agencies, including their registration, their code of conduct, and their obligations. And part of their obligations is actually to monitor migrant workers and be able to keep an up-to-date register. And when a migrant worker is in distress, they have certain obligations. So all of those things have been covered to the extent that a law like this can cover. And there are repercussions when private recruiters do not comply, and those are also covered within the law. But also Part 4 speaks a lot about the entire pre-departure process and procedure for foreign employment, to the extent that you're able to regulate this transaction than you do, because Kenya does not have jurisdiction over foreign employers, but Kenya has jurisdiction over its citizens and over private recruitment companies that work here. And the way then we hold foreign employers responsible is by working through the agents who have contracted them to find labor. So that is the extent to which we are able to regulate. Of course, the presence of labor attaches, like we said in the presentation, do a lot to help with that particular issue and to help with ensuring that laws are being complied with and so on. And the BLAs that Sharon spoke to, that we actually get into government-to-government bilateral labor agreements that speak to how, what is to happen should employers in the labor receiving country then begin to flout these rules, and we have all of that set up. A lot of this comes from our experience in dealing with problematic situations, and which is what has eventually found its way in the law. We do not have jurisdiction over the laws of other countries, but to the extent that many of the countries where we send labor are signatories to the ILO system, then they are governed by similar rules of international law as far as protecting the rights of workers is concerned, and then we are able to work through that, and often through diplomatic channels, to make sure the persons who are being ill-treated and so on can find relief. You had raised issues about discrimination and racism as well, and I believe Sharon might have answered this. But again, consistently, this is the purpose of this law, as is stipulated very clearly in Section 3, is to promote safe, fair, ethical, and orderly recruitment of workers, protect the rights of job seekers, safeguard the rights and promote welfare of migrant workers, and to promote opportunities for employment. Our own law is very clear about discrimination, and so it does not need to be restated here, because this law falls clearly under the Constitution. And as I said, the BLAs, as well as international legal norms, such as those found under the ILO system, apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Pierce. I hope, Ms. Linda, I hope your question has been answered. Madam Pierce, Sharon, I think you'll agree with me. We have a lot of, we are seeing very interesting questions here on chat.
Yes,
we still have people who have raised their hands, so I don't know which way to proceed, but I can just read one question here, interesting question from the chat. From Timothy Tairu, who's asking, are all Kenyans who work abroad migrant workers? Or is this mainly for workers who go through recruitment agencies? Then in part 4, section 3.1 talks about exclusions. Do these exclude those folks from every part of this bill, or just the pre-departure programs? Sharon?
Safari, thank you for that question. Yes, as long as you are a Kenyan citizen and you have migrated to another country and you're working in that country, yes, you're considered as a migrant worker. But then that's where we stayed under section, there's an exemption in terms of who this bill might not apply to. But as long as you're a Kenyan citizen out there and your migration status is for employment, yes, then you're considered a Kenyan migrant worker. Thank you.
I'm going to take a few more questions from, I see some hands raised, then maybe we'll be able to give an opportunity for our peers to do the closing. But before that, let me allow John Karanja to get to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very nice presentation to all the panel. I have to say something about the welfare fund. I think I'm based in the UK, and one of the key things and the most important thing that this bill will do is to have that fund for repatriating people, because we do spend a lot of time, money, and supporting each other when the need comes for us to repatriate a person. And my second point, it might sound trivial, but I think it's important. When you refer to us as migrant workers, it has a different connotation when people do go abroad to work. They are treated as if they are dispensable, not as important as the other workers. I'll give you, for instance, if a British person was to come to work in Kenya, they're not referred to as migrant workers. They are referred to as expatriates. And I think if the wording can change slightly, I don't know, probably the legal minds can go into that further, but the wording can change and it can improve however we are perceived. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Karanja. I think you have to take into consideration your comment, suggestion. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that, but I think, okay. So maybe one or two more, two last ones. Mr. Nyariki Shiriba.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much for today. This opportunity to participate in this event. As you can hear, I'm from the comfort of my home. I have some kids here, so please don't mind. So I'm conscious of the time constraints here, that we don't have much time, so I will be very brief. And so my name is Nyariki Siriba Dennis. I'm here in the US and I'm a practicing lawyer. I have made some opinions on the chat section, and but I wanted to briefly say, first of all, I want to commend my colleague. His name is Laban. He spoke before me and raised some extensive issues regarding this bill. So I will go to one thing that I didn't hear him mention, and specifically, so if this is going to be a bill, I would want the, as a lawyer, the plain language to be clear as what it means. So my main concern is the definition of the term migrant. It kind of seems kind of, broad. So my recommendation is to define it, in more details, and I've given suggestions on how to do that. For example, saying a migrant worker, I think under section 2, it says a Kenyan citizen. So we are all Kenyan citizens of all kinds. We are permanent residents. We have dual citizens of respective countries. I know the pre-departure exceptions have been mentioned as to exclude some of the people who are not intended protected class of this bill. But I would rather have that inserted in the definition part as opposed to the a different part. I think is the pre-departure part. And so specifically in the definition here where it says, for example, migrant Kenyan citizen who intends to migrate to a foreign country for work, I would rather, clearly, because, we are all here, some of us are working, permanent residents. So is this and my understanding that this is more targeting Kenyan citizens. For example, a prior speaker said, if your immigration status is employment, so I would think that that kind of employment is temporary kind of employment or seasonal. So if you would, limit or narrow that work to seasonal or temporary work, and in the definition part. And as far as the definition, those exceptions, I think they're in section 31, the pre-departure part. if they could be included in the definition, all those exceptions, and in addition, add permanent residents and dual citizens. Because like I said, my understanding, permanent residents are not the intended class that is to be protected by this bill. So because of time, I would, I mean, unless there are any questions as to what I've mentioned, we also, like Laban Opande said, we have an organization for lawyers here. You know, I would invite the ministry to engage us as a group, maybe on a separate platform, because we are many of us, over 180 something, like Laban said, we can provide more detailed perception or perspective from legal point of view. And I think we will give a very invaluable feedback towards making this bill, which I think is a good bill. And I welcome it because we have had all these horrifying stories being told all over, or particularly in the Middle East. Because that's why a lot of people conceive that, you know, the problem is only in the Middle East. That's where most of the issue that is to be addressed by the bill is. But so if we can, as lawyers, we can get a platform and give more feedback, I'm just inviting the ministry here to consider that. With that, I'll give it back to you, Mr. Safari. Thank you for your time, giving me time to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director Shiriba. I think you have given a very valid point and your comments are noted. And I think we are going to, in consultation, definitely with the stakeholders, we are going to invite you to give your comments, perspectives, which are very good perspectives that are going to contribute a lot to this bill. So thank you very much, and we're going to communicate and ensure that your views, suggestions, and perspectives are taken into consideration. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to invite our very own Ambassador Washington Olo to get to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Safari. In fact, this is wonderful, exciting. And first of all, let me also say I joined a bit late. Nevertheless, I've really followed with a lot of interest what has been going on. And let me first of all say that this welfare fund, I think, is something that we've been talking about quite a lot. In fact, since these issues of migration started, we have been talking about welfare fund and how we can bring in this fund to question Kenyan migrant workers. When we look at the whole issue of migration, normally there are two aspects. We have the countries of origin, and of course we have the countries of destination. We happen to be in the countries of origin. And if you look at, for example, what is happening in most countries where our workers are, most countries where the workers originate from do have this kind of fund. And I think we as a country have been lagging behind that. Up to this point in time, we have never established a welfare fund, despite the research, the studies that we have done before to ensure that it's in place. So I think this bill is coming at the right time, and our discussion, our contribution to ensure that it is in place is a good thing. Now, let me say something that Mr. Karanja commented on. Now, when we talk about the migrant workers, I know there's normally that connotation that comes in with the migrant workers. But countries, for example, like Qatar in Middle East, they're using the expat workers. So more and more we are seeing countries trying to use expat workers as opposed to migrant workers. And I think maybe as we look at this bill, probably we could tweak the title, I don't know, so that we bring in the issue of expat workers, because instead of taking migrant workers as those low-skilled workers, and you have heard what the PS was saying, this thing even extends. It's not just Middle East. Problems emanate from everywhere. The repatriation problems emanate from everywhere, whether it is Middle Middle East, whether it is UK, whether it is the US, whether it is Australia, they are always there. So it is not really geographical such that when we talk about migrant workers, we're talking about, let's say, Middle East. It happens everywhere. So I think maybe we might probably need to think about how we tweak it a bit. And then we also have people who are working abroad, but they did not migrate to go and work. They went maybe probably to study. After that, they've acquired, they get jobs. They get jobs while they're there. There are also others who probably have gone to visit. So by the time they were exiting, they were not really migrating to go and work. They went to visit. After they have visited, after some time, they get jobs. How do we treat them? So I think those are some of the issues that maybe we really need to think through deeply. Otherwise, let me say this is wonderful, and I really thank Safari, Sharon. This is great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Balozi. And I think at this juncture, and protocol detects that in a short while, we'll invite our PS, State Department of Diaspora Affairs, Madam Rizzo Njogu, to give the closing. Before that, I'd like to just to inform the members of the diaspora that we really are grateful for your questions and comments, suggestions, perspectives. And we have a lot of hands raised yet, but for the benefit of time, we will not be able to answer all the questions at this point, but we will be sharing with you an email address, which will be, you can send your questions, comments, and any suggestions that you have, and we'll be able to look into them and take them into consideration and give you a feedback. And we'll keep on engaging you. So I'll allow Madam PS kindly proceed to do the closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, colleagues, and thank you so much for friends and diasporians for coming to have this conversation. It's a really, really important one to have, and I'm grateful for the very engaged conversations that we've had. I want to thank you, Ambassador Allah, for making the time to pass by and be a part of this, because you have been a part of the development of the journey of this bill. So we are really, really grateful for that. I am sorry that we do have to finally close, because we want to engage, but we cannot keep at it forever. So I see that the team has put up the email address for you to send your comments to. So diasporians, you can send your comments to communications@diaspora.go.ke. We will collate them as your submission, and then we will forward them to the State Department for Labor. So that's communications@diaspora.go.ke. So thank you very much, Kenneth Ogono, for your comments as well, that this is purely PR we are doing. I guess the P and R stand for public engagement or something like that. We are grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. We are very grateful for your comments that you have sent to us and that you will continue to send. We note that a number of questions are still in the Q&A that we will not be able to get to, but please do send in your remarks, your comments, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. A little bit aside from this, we wanted to also understand from you what is a good time for you, for us to have these kinds of public engagements. So please, if you haven't already seen the poll on Twitter, head out there and tell us what time works for you. We want to be able to reach you at a time that is, most comfortable for you, depending on your time zones, and then we're able to have a deeper engagement. Look out for more communications. Next week, we'll be engaging you on the draft strategic plan for the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. Thank you so much, and good night.